Hi everyone, welcome. Well, today we're finally seeing a nice new tablecloth here down in my wormery, and today's going to be the inaugural launch of using this nice new tablecloth. The old one was just so haggard, so filthy, had to be replaced. And I guess if you're wondering where the old one went, yep, you guessed it. I made a whole bunch of bedding out of it, mix of cardboard and pink paper. So that's going to be the new bedding for a little while once I get to using it. I'm just going to have to finish using what I've already got. So the system that we're checking in on today is right here. It's my bin of mixed red worms. A little bit of an unusual setup with the bedding in this system consisting of all twine. And originally it started with some cardboard, but today at 70 days of age, after 10 weeks, I would have to assume that most of the cardboard that was used to build that system, especially the type of cardboard that we used, which was the carton type of cardboard that you see in egg cartons and stuff like that, there's probably very little, if any, signs of that. So I've got a nice yummy meal for these little guys set up. We're going to slip on a glove, get the system up on the bench, and we're going to get them fed. Yeah, I'm not sure if you could see this little flying insect over here. It was actually airborne, and I swatted it down onto the cardboard. So I'm not sure whether you could see it or not. Oh boy, look at that. Well, I guess just to make my point about the little flying insect, one thing I've been doing anytime I see even one flying insect is grabbing my Mosquito Dunks and dropping some of it into the system, and I figured do it now before I forget. And then we could proceed with checking in on these little guys. What I've got for these little guys is collection of zucchini, and a little bit of it can be seen here, but I think the majority of it is down low. It's potato peels. There's a coffee filter in here with the coffee in it as well, and there could be other things in here. I just don't recall exactly what all they're getting. The interesting thing about having a system built out of a whole bunch of twine is that it's all kind of a connected mass at this point. So if I wanted to dig a hole here, I would have a very difficult time doing so because of the nature of the material kind of interlocked into each other. And you know, the one place in the system where we made a very deliberate hole is right down the middle over here. So we kind of nudged the rope off to the side so we could have a place where the feedings can go in. Since I typically feed down the middle, I figured let's do it there. The interesting thing about the bedding being all interconnected like that is that you can kind of just grab it like this and lift up almost the entire thing and get right to the bottom of the system. And that's exactly what we've been doing lately to get a peek at how things down low look. And the one thing we did last time was we lifted up the edges on the side so that we could sprinkle some bedding material down low. I was concerned that maybe, you know, the cardboard that I made reference to earlier, that carton cardboard that was used to build the system originally, in addition to the twine, I thought might have been depleted by this time. So I've been thinking that the wormies can probably use some sort of readily available carbon food in addition to the nitrogen-rich kitchen scraps that they get regularly at each feeding. So I wanted to be really generous. Not only did I put a good bit of shredded paper cardboard bedding mix down into the feeding zone, but it was also sprinkled down beneath the twine bedding. Oh boy. Feeding zone's pretty busy in this system. Look at all those wormies. Alright, let's rest these little guys down. It's pretty wild feeling all that worm action in your hand. Oh boy, that is a lot of worms too. Alright, but you know, I see a worm stranded out on the cardboard cover. Let me go fetch that little guy. Clumsy me in my effort to save this little guy. I was a little bit hasty in trying to grab him, and he slipped out of my hand onto the floor. This to me looks like one of the Indian blue worms, where that little bulge on their body that you see on a worm is very flush with their body, so it's a little bit hard to see that thing that they call the clitellum. And I think just the fast moving behavior of this little guy is also an indicator of it being quite possibly a Indian blue worm, and the appearance too. So the food that they got last time, I could see a little hint of it right here, was this purple cabbage or red cabbage. I'm not quite sure what it's referred to as. When I first scooped out the contents of the feeding zone, my first sense that identified it was my nose, my sense of smell. And then I spotted that little hint of purple over there. So I assume that they really liked that stuff. Kind of makes me surprised that after a 14-day interval since their last feeding, that there would even be any of that remaining. But maybe it was just obscured by some other stuff that prevented the worms from gaining access to it. You never know. So this was what I was referring to in terms of a sort of pre-built hole into which we've been placing the feedings. So let's, I was going to grab my prepared bedding, but I figured as long as this mix right here was within easy reach, I figured let's just use some of this. This stuff doesn't have the benefit of being dampened the way my prepared bedding is, and it also does not have leaves mixed into it as my prepared bedding has. But like I said, it was handy. It was right there, so I figured let's use some of that instead. So let's see, we did find a few pieces of paper products over here. And then there's other things here that look like they might have been leftovers from the last feeding when we scooped out the contents of the feeding zone. This to me actually looks like cauliflower and even smells a little bit like it. So I think we've managed to collect up all the leftovers. This looks like another leftover. In this case, I believe it's a stem of a banana. And then the two large objects I put in there, I'm sure most people can identify those. Those are pumpkin stems. So let's put in a little bit more of this bedding material into the feeding zone. But I want to make sure I leave myself enough space in this feeding zone to plop in all that lovely food that we bought down here for them. Because even though it doesn't have a great deal of weight to it, it does seem like it's occupying a good bit of space. So it's sort of a lightweight material, I guess, for the most part. It's all frozen, so I assume that as it starts to thaw out, it'll begin emitting a lot of its moisture content, as most things do after they've been frozen and thaw. So you can see some of this potato peel's a little bit stuck together over here. And that looks pretty good to me. The one thing I do remember now from when I watched the video of our last check-in 2 weeks ago, we left a few napkins placed right out on top of the feeding zone, which I don't see any sign of, so that must mean the worms must have gobbled it up. I mean, you saw what a dedent there was, a recess right over where the feeding had been applied for these little guys. So I would assume that there was a good bit of worm traffic coming and going out of this feeding zone, and that usually means if there was any sort of a carbon like a carbon-rich sort of a food product there, like the bedding material that we usually use, then that would probably have gotten nibbled away in those 2 weeks. And there's still some more food here. Let's not forget to give them the coffee. And what else do we have here? I would normally take the crushed eggshell, the grit that I use, and place it right onto the foods, but I kind of forgot about it. So all the veggies and all the bedding material is down low now, but that's okay. I think we could still apply the crushed eggshell as the grit to accompany this feeding, and the worms should be able to figure that out pretty good. Now, a little something we did last time, I think I mentioned it earlier, was the way we lifted up the bedding the way we can in this system. And we actually threw some additional bedding type material, and at this, I guess in my mind it almost seems like it's, yeah, bedding, but it's also like a readily available carbon food source. Because even though the worms probably really like the kitchen scraps that they get fed, I think they're equally dependent on having some other sort of a food substance that's not so nitrogen rich as the fruits and veggies that we give them, and that's where the bedding comes into play. Whether it's leaves or shredded paper, cardboard, or whatever, the stuff will eventually get consumed, so it is just another food product from the point of view of the worms. But until it becomes that, the worms are generally utilizing it as the bedding material, or the, you know, the medium in which they're living. And you know, there's really large chunks of twine over here. I believe this is pretty much an example of the largest piece that's in here, and it goes all the way down to the really thin stuff that I used to suspend the plants in my garden. And it really makes me wonder how long it's going to take. After 10 weeks in service, on day 70, they've been fed 5 times, so this is feeding number 6 going in here. And here's a little bundle of the thinner type stuff that I simply collect at the end of the growing season and set aside so that at some point perhaps we'll have a chance to compost it responsibly in a worm bin. And I am definitely curious to see when we're going to finally start seeing some progress on the twine that we used to build this system. It's clearly a pretty, you know, tricky material for the worms to work down, or I don't know about tricky being the right word, but it's a tough, I guess a somewhat tough material. So it might take the worms some time. But we're not in a real big hurry here. At less than 100 days old, the system's quite young. I've only got a couple systems that are younger, so it's definitely among my youngest systems. So I'm trying to think if there's anything we've missed. I don't think we have. I think we're in pretty good shape here. We're just going to go ahead and return this nifty top covering. I don't know if that's the same flying insect I was pointing out earlier. I just saw him run. There he goes. He's underneath the plastic. Well, I got a feeling I just did that little guy in, so he's going to be there forever. And there's another one just took off. So hopefully the there's 2 of them mating. I wonder if there's something to do with, perhaps, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I've created a nice little hiding spot in a home for the flying insects by creating these nifty, weird top coverings. One of these days I might have to take a closer look at this, because if this is the culprit for us having issues with flying insects, then it's got to go. But I kind of like it. I like the way I could just grab it by its little handle and lift it up whenever I need to. So that's it for our check-in now with the 70-day-old mixed red worm population in here. Doing really nice. Always fun to come in here, remove the top covering, and see a nice worm party happening. And I've got a feeling next time we come back in here, we'll probably see more of the same. So that's the end of the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.